she would be throwing things and screaming and flailing and wanting and trying to hit you and saying that you're a bastard. Then wait till your dad gets home, I'll tell him the things that you didn't do today, and I wish you were never born, and why can't you be like your brother, and what's the matter with you, and then I would try to say something. She would say, shut up, I don't want to hear it, no, you're stupid, I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, I wish you were never born?
Seven.
Do you remember her being gentle and affectionate with you?
She was never gentle and affectionate with me. Like I said before, I felt that she hated me, and that's what she told me all the time.
Just the way she treated Lyle, I knew that she didn't like Lyle. She would blame him for things that he didn't do to Dad because she didn't want to get in trouble.
Terrifying, and it was confusing.
Why was it confusing?
Because you just didn't know why. You'd just explode constantly. And you'd just be walking around the house like this because my mother could go off like that, and you could be hurt. She could throw things at you. Sometimes she'd grab me when I was little and hold me on the ground in awkward positions.
What would happen, if you can recall, if, for example, she couldn't find her purse, or she couldn't find her keys, or she couldn't find something?
She'd blame Lyle.
And to the best of your knowledge, did he have anything to do with her purse or her keys or anything like that?
No, whenever she couldn't find anything or really was late or this, and Lyle was there, she'd always blame Lyle. She'd always say, it's your fault, you're making me busy, you make me too frustrated, I don't have time with you around.
Grabbed me upstairs and put me underneath her bed. I was claustrophobic. It was only about this high, and I just had enough room to get under, and
Could you turn over?
you couldn't turn over. And the ferret went to the bathroom all under there, so the whole area was never cleaned. So it was like a urine smell. And it was terrible, and that's why she put me there.
She disliked him. She hated him. There was a lot of tension, and she didn't care about him.
I think I said her name, and she was doing something in the kitchen, and she cut her hand, and she ran over, and she pushed me against the glass, and she rubbed her hand in my face, and said, see what you did to me?
Did she get blood on you?
Oh yeah, her hand was a mess, and my face was a mess, and I ate dinner that way. I went to wash it off. She said, no, just leave it, just eat. And I thought I was going to have to go to school like that.
Now, what was different with you and your mother?
She, when I was younger, seemed to care a lot more about me than Lyle. In fact, she told me that I was a better kid than Lyle.
Beating me with her hands and kicking me on the ground, and dragging me by the hair down to my room, which my dad did sometimes that way also. And she would just throw me in the room, and she was much bigger than me. She just would kick me on the ground when she was having these rages. I would just defend myself until she left. And then in Pennington, she'd throw things at you. One time, she chased me around the house with one of the kitchen knives, and didn't actually get me.
I ran in the house to get Mom and say, Lyle's in the car's rolling down the hill, because it was a slanted driveway. And she said, okay, I'll be there in a minute.
What was she doing?
She was on the phone.
And was she there in a minute?
She made it just before the car ran over the mailbox. Took her a little while. I was surprised.
And were you alarmed?
Yeah, I was scared for Lyle. I wanted him to get out of the car, but he was trying to get the car back into gear because he didn't want to get in trouble.
This was a soccer camp where every minute was allotted for, and we had specific half hour where we could call home, and I always called home.
What happened when you called?
she didn't accept the call.
Could you hear her voice?
Yes.
Could you hear her refuse to accept your call?
Yes.
And did you try and call her again?
Yeah, I call every day.
She ever accept the call?
Never.
How'd that make you feel?
I was just I'm embarrassed, and I went every day, even though I knew that it was going to happen. And I just kind of hung by the phone like I was talking on the phone too. I wouldn't say anything, and all the other boys, because they would talk about if he had called home and things like, you know, they would just be saying that they talked to their dad or this was happening. I didn't want to tell them that my mom didn't want to talk to me.
Lyle was in Mom's bedroom. He was on this side of the bed, and he had stepped on a needle, and I just heard him cry out. And I was in the hallway or right next to my room, and I came in and I saw the needle sticking out of both sides of his big toe, and it really scared me. And
How was he behaving?
oh, he was crying and screaming. And so I ran and got Mom, and she was on the phone, and this time I didn't care. I was just pulling on her arm, asking her to come, because Lyle was in pain, and Lyle had a needle in his foot, and she pushed me away, and she said, "I'll be there in a minute."
And you told her that Lyle had a needle in his foot?
Yes.
And did she come right away?
No.
And did you have to go back again?
Yes, I was begging for her to come, because Lyle wasn't moving. He had his foot right in the air. It was really hurting him.
And my mom would be like in the kitchen somewhere, and during these conversations, occasionally, she would just make a noise and shake her head. She'd go, and my dad would grab me, and he'd yank me out of the table, and he'd just drag me down to the room, and he'd say I was lying. And I would be in the room, and then he would go, and he would punish me. My mother was mostly the one that would explode about the bedwetting, or would punish me about the bedwetting in all kinds of different ways.
How would she punish you?
Sometimes she would rub my face in the sheets. She'd refuse to change the sheets, and I'd sleep on the floor. And sometimes I would just be banished from the house, like I was in Muncie. And I would just stay outside. And then she would always tell my dad.
Were you ever taken to a doctor?
No. And she said that she was taking 13 pills a day, and she showed them to me.
Whose fault was it she was taking those pills?
She told me that I had to start doing better and stop upsetting my dad so much, because he was coming down on her, and the whole thing was causing her so much stress. She was having to take these pills. It was actually a nice conversation.
But she was saying it was because of you.
Right. But
Why was that nice?
because she was reaching out to me.
Sometimes when she asked you how she looked, would she be inappropriately attired?
She would be topless.
Did you continue to sleep in her bed around this time when you're 11 and 12?
Sometimes.
And sometimes, did you touch your mom?
Yes.
And when you say she would wash you with a sponge, would she just wash your back, or?
No. She would wash me everywhere.
She would wash your genitals?
Yes.
And how long did these things go on for?
Until I was 13. A little bit farther than that.
Who stopped it?
I did.
Did she show you specifically that she was unhappy that it had stopped, or she was angry about it?
She just kept exposing herself, picking me up at the clubs with, in a robe, exposed, leaving her underwear around, calling me into the room when she knew that she was, if she looked pretty, and call me a liar when I said yes. Sometimes she would be in a tantrum, and then she'd come over and she would touch my face real gentle, like she was going to kiss me, and then she would go back into a rage. I was very angry. I thought that it was unfair.
Why was it unfair?
I was hoping that things were going to get better for our whole relationship, and things might get better. She got worse.
Did you think she was going to love you if you did these things?
I took it to be love, and that's what I want.
Do you have memories of a child of being left places, your mother just sort of abandoning you at places?
Yes.
What's your earliest memory of that?
It was in the airport with my little brother. I was like, I don't know if I was 5 years old. And I was there with all the luggage with my mom, and I had my brother either on my knee or sitting next to me. And we had all these suitcases around. I was at the airport with my mom. And I think that's the first time I remember being at the airport anyway. And she's just left. And I called after her, and she just left. And I waited by the luggage with my brother, and she was lost in basically the people that were shuffling around, and she just disappeared around the terminal. And she was gone for a long period of time. I don't know, I was panicking. I wasn't sure whether to go try and find her after a while, or I was take my brother with me, and I just decided that if I left the luggage, my dad would find out, so I just stayed there. And it seemed like an amazing amount of time later, she came back, and my brother was crying, and I was just, I didn't want to say anything, so I just didn't say anything.
Would sometimes there be punishment for things that you didn't know what you had done wrong?
Yes. She would just be completely out of control, screaming, grabbing things off counters and shelves and breaking them, throwing things around the house. Sometimes come after you, sometimes run away. Just a complete explosion. And I remember one time my dad walked in, and I don't think he had any idea that sometimes that these things were going on in the house, because he was in shock. And he just was in shock. And my brother looked at him and he was crying. And I told him later that you got to do something for my mom. Because she was out of control.
What'd your dad say?
He said to just avoid her, and that she was not a rational person. Just avoid her. And that's what I did.
Do you remember the things she would say?
Yes.
What would she say?
She would say that you're a bastard, you ruined her life, you're ungrateful. How can you use that tone of voice with me and clean up after you all day? Wait till your dad gets home. I'm going to tell him how lazy you've been today. You're a terrible boy.
Would she use that tone of voice?
No.
Would she speak louder than that?
She'd speak louder, and my mother cursed a lot.
Was it frightening?
It was terrifying, and it was confusing. I would be in my room for all day, which was part of the problem, because I was supposed to have a schedule, and if my mom punished me and put me in the room, then I couldn't keep the schedule. So my dad would come home and be furious.
What did you do when you had to go to the bathroom?
I went to the bathroom in the room, either out the window, and she gave me like a Tupperware. It was more like one of those hospital vomiting things. I kept it under the bed. That's what I used if I needed to go to bed. She was becoming much harder to be around, prone to rages and embarrassing tirades and dangerous throwing things around and coming at you. And so my dad pretty much left her alone and stayed away. We all kept our distance.